I came in drenched that afternoon, and the sound of the rain hitting my jacket felt louder than my own heartbeat. They'd cancelled the game because the field flooded. I'd been standing under those bleachers for a good 20 minutes, hoping the downpour would let up. It didn't. Eventually I just said to hell with it, jogged across the parking lot, and got into my pickup. Radio was on the fritz, so it was just me and the drumming on the roof for the next half hour. Felt like someone was tapping on my skull from the outside. No big thoughts in my head, just the usual. How the team's performance had been so lately. How maybe I should call my buddy Dave sometime. How my wife might be surprised I was home early. Stupid, regular stuff that doesn't mean anything until life twists sideways. I drove past a couple of traffic lights. They were blinking yellow from the storm. By the time I turned onto my street, I could hardly see. Rainwater spilling over the gutters, wind pushing the trees around. I pulled into our driveway and stared at the side of the house. The garage light was off, which was odd because usually, when it rains, she leaves it on for me. I thought maybe she forgot. It happens. When I cut the engine, it was a strange hush, except for the water streaming down the windshield. I sat there, taking off my soaked cap, and looked at the garage. Our house is a single-story thing, more wide than tall, a place we moved into right after my old man died. He'd left me a small inheritance, which helped with the down payment. My father used to say, "A house is only as strong as the hands that build it." Well, I didn't build it, but we poured everything into it. Painted the walls ourselves, put in a deck one summer. Made it ours. 20-something years. Two people living a life that most folks would call ordinary. Nothing special, but it was our place. I got out of the truck, hurried to the garage door, then paused. I noticed my wife's car parked right by the side window. Shiny. It looked recently washed. The droplets were rolling off in neat little rivulets. That was strange, too, because she usually washed it on Saturdays, and it wasn't Saturday. But I didn't think too hard about it. Just filed it away in my head. My hand was on the doorknob when I glimpsed movement through the tiny window that leads to the back of the garage, where there's a small storeroom. I wasn't sure what I was seeing at first, shapes, silhouettes. My wife's hair, I guess. I didn't have a direct angle, just a partial reflection in the glass and a bit of light from inside. Something about it seemed off. I froze. The cold from my wet clothes began to seep in. I took a step closer to the window. The storeroom has a fluorescent light that flickers when it's turned on, so it made everything look stuttery. There they were. Her knees on the concrete floor, his back turned slightly, her mouth moving around him. No mistaking that. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Then I realized I'd stopped breathing. I don't know how long I stood there. I expected to burst through the door, scream, do something dramatic. But I couldn't. I just watched. It felt like my arms weighed 100 pounds each, like they were pinned to my sides. You think in those moments you'd go ballistic, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just freeze. I finally stepped away, went back to my truck, and started it up. I turned on the high beams. I aimed them straight at that window. I held down the horn. The wipers thumped rhythmically. I saw her head jerk up, eyes wide, like a cornered animal. He didn't even move. Or if he did, I couldn't tell. I didn't wait to see more. I backed out of the driveway, tires slipping on the wet asphalt, and drove off. I can't recall exactly where I went. I think I just turned onto the nearest highway and kept going until the city lights disappeared in my mirrors. The storm was still raging, but I barely noticed it after a while. My mind was a blank sheet. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the simple fact that everything I thought was certain wasn't. I pulled over at a rest stop at some point, splashed water on my face in the men's room, looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection was pale, eyes red around the edges. I remember thinking, "You look old today." I sat in the truck for another hour, listening to the rain slow to a drizzle. Then I turned around and headed back. I passed a 24-hour diner on the way, thought about stopping for coffee, decided against it. I just wanted to get home, see if they were still there, or if she was alone now, or if. Honestly, I didn't know what I wanted. I just kept driving until I found myself in front of the garage again. It was dark by then. The storm had moved on. I stepped out, walked to the back of the truck, and lifted the tailgate. Inside, I keep an old toolbox. It was my dad's. The latch is half rusted, the metal battered and scratched. I pulled it out, carried it to her car. I popped the hood first, removed the battery cables, unhooked everything I recognized. My hands were steady, but my chest felt like it was burning. Next, I unbolted the doors. One by one. The metallic groan echoed in the quiet. Each piece, I laid on the wet ground. Mirrors came off. The hood. The trunk. I kept going until there was barely anything left but the frame. I didn't say a word. I didn't call out for her. If she was inside watching, I didn't care. Eventually, there was a heap of parts in the middle of the car wash bay, because that's what he owned, or managed. I can't remember if he was the boss or some employee. They always wore the same shirts. Either way, that was his place. I thought, let it stand as an offering. A sacrifice. I had no script, no plan. Just something in me needed to do this. I wasn't thinking about revenge or property damage or any of that. It felt like the only action that made sense, given how everything else had collapsed. You strip away the layers, you see what's left underneath. I walked a few steps away, dialed the local police station. I told them I suspected a chop shop or stolen parts. Gave them the address. Hung up. Then I got back in my truck. I shut off my phone so no one could call me back. The drive felt quieter than before. Almost peaceful, which makes me sound like a lunatic. But I guess after you see something like that, your mind finds its own way of coping. I can't say how I felt that night. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was more like a hollow ache. Like a warning bell had gone off and then died out, leaving a ringing in my ears. I could still see her face in the headlights when I closed my eyes. That shock, that guilt or shame or whatever it was. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel sorrow, not right then. I just felt nothing. Maybe that was the worst part of it. I ended up at a friend's place, but I didn't knock. Just parked across the street for a while, stared at the porch light. He was one of the few guys I used to watch games with, but something in me said, don't do it, don't drag him into this. At least not now. So I drove off again, found a Motel 6, paid for a room in cash, and went to bed fully dressed. The sheets smelled like bleach and cigarettes. I lay awake for hours, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. At some point I dozed off. That was how the day ended. Rain, broken car parts, and a motel room. I didn't know what came next or if I even wanted to know. My phone was still off. The world could have burned down that night, and I wouldn't have known. And that was just the beginning of it all. Next morning, I woke up feeling like my skull was packed with cement. I checked the clock on the nightstand, 7:13 a.m. I reached for my phone, stared at it for a moment, then decided it could stay off a bit longer. There was no message I wanted to see. I felt numb, but not in a comforting way. More like my arms and legs were moving on autopilot, and I was just a passenger in my own body. I splashed water on my face in the small motel bathroom, grabbed my keys, and got back in the truck. The air had that after-rain crispness, the asphalt still gleaming in the morning light. I had no idea where to go. My house was a few miles away. I could see if she was still there. I could see if he was there. But I couldn't bring myself to turn onto our street. Instead, I pulled into a diner lot, the same one I'd passed the night before, and went inside. Maybe I needed coffee. Maybe I just needed to sit among strangers. I found a booth near the window. The waitress came over, older woman, asked what I'd like. Just coffee, I said. She gave me a once-over, maybe noticed I hadn't shaved or changed clothes. She didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. I sipped coffee, watched a couple with a little boy at the next table. The kid was banging his spoon on the table, mumbling some toddler babble. The mom and dad were trying to hush him, keep him from disturbing the other customers. It made me think about how once upon a time, my wife and I had talked about kids. We never had them, though. Life got busy, then it got too late, or it felt like it was too late. Now I was sitting here, alone in a diner, and she was, who knows where. Eventually, I told myself to stop hiding, so I drove home. The garage door was closed. Her car, or what was left of it, obviously wasn't there. The place looked normal from the outside, like any other day. Grass still wet from the storm, the newspaper on the driveway wrapped in plastic. I went in through the front door, walked through the living room. My footsteps sounded loud on the hardwood. The house smelled stale, like nobody had opened a window in a while. I paused by the hallway that led to our bedroom, but I didn't go in. Couldn't yet. The only sign she'd been there was a half-finished cup of tea on the kitchen counter. The tea bag was dried out on the side of the mug. I touched the mug. Cold. So she'd been gone for a while. Or maybe she was somewhere in the house, but that felt unlikely. I called out her name once softly. No answer. I stood there, hearing my own heartbeat. Then I went out to the back porch. I stayed there for a while, watching the sky. The sun was fighting to break through the clouds. I tried to figure out my next move, but my thoughts kept circling back to the image of her on her knees in that storeroom. My stomach lurched. I swallowed it down, forced myself to breathe steady. I sat on the porch step, elbows on my knees, and stared at a puddle in the yard. It glistened, reflecting the shape of the porch railing. I felt completely alone, like the ground might open up and swallow me. After an hour or so, I went inside to gather a few clothes. I had no plan to stay under the same roof with her, if she came back. Maybe that was cowardly, or maybe it was just how it had to be. I stuffed a duffel bag with shirts, underwear, a pair of jeans, my toothbrush. Grabbed the phone charger. I avoided looking at the bed. The air in there seemed heavy, like the walls remembered everything. I stepped out again, locked the front door, and sat in my truck. I was about to turn on my phone when I saw her car pass by on the road, going slow. Except it wasn't her car anymore. She must have borrowed her sister's or a rental or something. She drove right by our house but didn't pull in. I caught a glimpse of her face in the driver's seat. She looked straight ahead, didn't even glance my way. I realized then we were both dancing around this silent standoff, not sure who would speak first. I let her go. I wanted it that way. I turned on my phone. Missed calls, missed texts, some from unknown numbers, some from my best friend, some from a number I recognized as hers. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I navigated to the local police department's non-emergency line, half expecting a message about last night. Nothing. They either handled it or wrote it off. I turned the phone back off. You'd think I would be full of rage, but the anger only showed up in flashes. Mostly, I just felt hollow. A big hole where my life used to be. I started the truck and pulled out, deciding to head across town to this old auto shop where I used to help out sometimes. A buddy of mine let me do odd jobs there. It was Sunday, so probably nobody'd be around. Good. I just wanted to be near the smell of motor oil and rust, let my hands do something mechanical if I needed. That's always how I process things, by working with my hands. On the way, I thought about my dad again. How he showed me how to change brake pads, how to use a torque wrench. Maybe some part of me wanted to feel close to him in that moment. The memory didn't soothe me, but at least it was something familiar. Every turn of the steering wheel felt heavier than usual. I was driving away from what had been my life for 2 decades, and I didn't know if I'd ever drive back. At the shop, I parked in the back lot where nobody would see. I unlocked the side door with an old spare key. My buddy gave it to me for emergencies. The inside was dim, dust motes floating in the shafts of sunlight from the windows. I found a stool by the workbench, sat down. I stared at the wall for a long time. There was an old radio on a shelf. I turned it on, fiddled with the dial. All I got was static. I left it running. The static felt appropriate. Fuzzy, uncertain, no clear signal. That was me. I have no idea how many hours I spent there. After a while, the sun started setting again, and I realized I hadn't eaten all day. I opened the mini fridge. A couple sodas, some expired yogurt. I shut it. My stomach rumbled, but I ignored it. Instead, I closed my eyes and remembered the look on her face when our headlights caught her. That flicker of recognition. That was the last time I'd seen her up close. She was still my wife, or had been, or however you want to phrase it. Legally, sure, we were married. But in reality, that moment severed something I didn't think could break. I stayed there until it was fully dark, then left. Ended up back at the motel, same room even. The guy at the desk gave me a funny look. I handed him cash, took the key, and went inside. This time, I showered, changed into fresh clothes, tried to wash the smell of grease and wet air off me. Couldn't sleep much. My mind kept spinning, thinking about the next day. Whether I'd go to work like normal, act like nothing happened, or whether I'd just drift. Couldn't decide. But morning came, as it always does. I woke up to the low hum of trucks on the highway outside. Took me a minute to remember everything. Then it rushed back like a wave, knocking the breath out of me. I just lay there, eyes on the ceiling, until I convinced myself to get up. Another day in a life I no longer recognized. I wish I could say I had a plan. I didn't. All I knew was, I wasn't going to sit around crying about it. I felt raw, but I also felt done. And that was only the start of what turned out to be a pretty damn rough week. Word got around, the way it does in places like ours. Small city or big town, whatever you want to call it. People talk. By Tuesday, I started hearing things. Fragments. Some folks said they saw police cars near the car wash the night I left the pile of parts. Others said the owner was furious, threatened to sue me, threatened all kinds of stuff. I heard that from a coworker who got it from his sister who dated a guy that worked at the wash. You know how it goes, rumors, half-truths, everyone telling a version of the story. I still hadn't turned my phone on, except to check a couple texts from my boss to see if I was fired yet. He just asked if I was okay, said I had some sick days. I didn't reply. I found myself sleeping at the auto shop most nights, or in my truck. I told the motel I wouldn't be back. Didn't feel like paying for a room I barely used. The idea of going back to the house tied my stomach in knots. On Wednesday, I finally ran into my best friend. Let's call him Mark. I'd known him since high school. He was the guy I used to watch games with. When I saw him at the gas station, I thought for a second about avoiding him, but he spotted me before I could slip away. He walked over, shoulders tense. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I answered. My voice came out scratchy. I hadn't really spoken to anyone in days. He hesitated, then said, "You all right?" Stupid question, but that's what people ask. I just shrugged. He studied me, then lowered his voice. "Look, man, I don't know how to say this, but I knew something was up. I mean, for a while. Maybe not all the details." He sounded unsure, like he was trying to gauge my reaction. I felt my neck tense. "What do you mean?" I asked, my eyes on the gas pump. He took a breath. Your wife, she was messing around. I heard rumors. I swear I didn't want to believe it. Then one time, months ago, she left me a drunk voicemail by accident. It was weird. She was clearly not talking to me, but I could hear stuff in the background. He said he deleted it, didn't know what to do. "I should have told you," he murmured. "I just didn't know how." My stomach felt like it dropped into my shoes. This was the first time I'd heard it confirmed that it wasn't just one slip. It had been going on. "For how long?" I asked quietly. He swallowed. "I think a couple years, at least. There were other guys too. I don't have all the details, but I heard enough that..." He trailed off. I just stood there, listening to my pulse in my ears. A couple years. More than one guy. My mouth felt dry. I looked at Mark's face. He looked genuinely sorry, but there was also guilt. He'd known more than he let on. I wondered who else knew. Were people laughing behind my back? Did everyone in town see me as the clueless husband? I squeezed the gas nozzle. Right, I managed to say. Well, now I know. He shifted his weight, kicked at a loose pebble on the ground. Man, I cut him off. Yeah, I said. I didn't want to hear an apology. It wouldn't change anything. I hung up the nozzle, screwed the cap back on the tank, and started to walk away. Then I stopped. Mark, I said over my shoulder. Next time you see me, don't. That was the last thing I said to him. I drove off, fury pulsing in my veins, but it was a low, simmering fury. I felt betrayed not just by her, but by everyone who might have known. I wasn't sure what to do with that. Yelling at Mark wouldn't fix it. I'd never been in a fight with him before, but now I couldn't imagine sitting down for a beer ever again. The final nail was hammered in when he said he had a voicemail. He actually heard something. And he kept it to himself. Maybe that's human, but it still cut deep. That evening, I decided to check in at the house. I waited until it was dark, parked down the street, walked through the backyard. The porch light was off, the windows were dark. I tried the back door. It was locked. I let myself in with my key, crept through like a stranger. The living room looked the same, but it felt empty. There was a stack of mail on the kitchen table, mostly junk. I found a note in her handwriting that said, "We need to talk." No date, no. "I'm sorry." Just that. I folded it and stuck it in my pocket. I peered into the bedroom. The bed was half-made, looked like she'd been sleeping on her side only. I saw a picture of us from maybe 10 years ago on the dresser. Smiling faces, arms around each other, that typical couple pose. It felt like I was looking at strangers. I left the house without touching anything else. At the auto shop, I flicked on a dim light, sat on a metal chair, and turned my phone on. Messages poured in. Hers were a mix of angry, apologetic, and confused, all scattered. I only skimmed. One text read, "Why would you do that to my car?" Another said, "We can fix this if you just talk to me." Then there was one about, "Where are you? People are asking questions." I didn't reply. I deleted them all, one by one. Then I saw a voicemail from my boss. Probably just him checking in again. I didn't care. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize. Something about a recording. My stomach dropped. I opened it. It was just an audio file, no explanation. I hesitated, then played it. Static, some muffled noises. Her voice. She was slurring, half laughing, half moaning, saying something like, "He's not here, and I'm in our bed, can you believe it?" Then more garbled talk, a man's voice in the background. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew. This was a call from inside our house, from our bedroom, and she was bragging about it. I forced myself to listen until the end. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. When it finished, I just sat there. I didn't scream. Didn't throw the phone. I felt a piece of me detach, sink to the bottom of me. A numbness replaced it. I realized there was no going back, no patching it up. That was gone. I stared at the dark corners of the shop, at the tools on the walls, and something in me felt quiet, resolved. Not calm, exactly, but dead certain. I thought back to how we had a second account, the one we used to call the nest egg. We'd been squirreling away money there for years, for our retirement, or a dream trip. I decided right then that I'd take every last cent of it. I had no plan what to do with it yet. I just knew that was the next step. She'd taken enough from me. Now, I was going to do something of my own. Something final. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew it was coming. I turned off the phone again and sat in that silence. The weight in my chest felt like a stone, too heavy to move. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. A couple years, different men, phone calls from my own bed. My best friend knew, other people knew. It was all piling up. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just sat there until the clock on the wall told me another night had passed. Then I got up, stepped outside to watch the first light of dawn, and waited for whatever was next. I took the money out on Thursday. Emptied the entire second account. The teller at the bank asked if I was making a big purchase or needed a cashier's check. I said I wanted it in my checking account, all of it. She tapped at the keyboard, printed a receipt, handed it to me without much expression. Maybe she'd seen 100 men doing the same thing for different reasons. I folded it and walked out. I still didn't know exactly what my move was. But an idea started forming when I remembered my wife's old high school friend. Let's call her Nicole. They used to be close, then drifted apart. My wife would sometimes talk about how Nicole had hit it big. In some city out west, opened a small salon, made decent money, whatever. But the real story was, my wife had always been jealous of her. Said she was younger looking, flashier, basically the type of person who rubbed success in your face. I'd only met Nicole once, maybe 2 decades ago. She seemed all right to me, but what did I know? Well, it turned out Nicole had moved back to town a few months ago. Rumor was she wanted to open a new salon but needed investors. I found her number in the phone book, or maybe it was an online search, can't recall. I texted her out of the blue. Told her I had money, I knew she wanted to open a place, and I wanted to talk. She answered quickly, said we could meet at a coffee shop near the old mall. When I walked in, I recognized her from memory, though she looked a bit older. Time does that. She wore a sharp blazer, a big ring on her finger, and carried herself like someone who wanted to be noticed. We sat down at a corner table. She looked curious, maybe a little skeptical. So, she said, what's this about? I told her I heard she was looking to open a salon near the west side of town. She nodded. I need capital, she admitted. Banks aren't giving me the terms I want. So, if you're offering, I can give you the money, I said. No strings, except one condition. She raised an eyebrow. Which is? I explained that I wanted her to hire my wife as an administrator, front desk type. Pay her minimum wage, or close to it. I'd install a few discreet security cameras in the lobby for theft prevention. I wanted my wife to be there, to see me walk in every day, or at least whenever I felt like it, and not say a word to me. Just do her job, greet customers, and get no special treatment. Nicole stared at me for a moment, clearly trying to figure out what she was stepping into. Is this some kind of revenge thing? She asked. Call it whatever you want, I said flatly. I'll pay you enough to open your place. You can put my name on the paperwork as a partner or not, I don't care. But you need to make sure my wife works there, and she can't just up and quit after a week. You make it so she needs the job. My wife didn't have many marketable skills, not after years of drifting between part-time gigs. I figured this would lock her in. Or at least it'd make her life complicated if she tried to run. Nicole drummed her fingers on the table. She looked uncertain, maybe uncomfortable, but money talks. That's a tall order, she said. But if you're backing the salon, I guess I can do that. Don't you think she'll suspect something if she knows you're behind it? I shrugged. Probably. But by then, it'll be too late. She won't have better options. A silence settled between us. I finally said, So is it a deal? She chewed on her lip. Then she nodded. Yeah, she said. It's a deal. I'll open next month if we move fast. Location's already picked out. I just need to finalize the lease and start renovations. I shook her hand. It felt surreal. I wasn't sure if I was proud of what I was doing. It felt petty, but also like I needed it. I needed her to see me, day after day, unspoken words between us. I wanted to watch her shoulders tense when I walked in. Maybe that makes me a bad guy. But I was past caring about that. True to her word, Nicole found a spot in a small strip mall not far from our neighborhood. They began work right away. My job was to funnel money when needed. I wired it from my checking account in chunks, keeping a paper trail but making sure everything was legit. part of me kept expecting my wife to call and ask if I was behind it. But she never did. Probably because she didn't know Nicole was even back in town. Or maybe she was too caught up in her own mess. The day the salon opened, Nicole posted a help wanted ad for an administrator/receptionist. I told her to discreetly encourage my wife to apply. My wife, strapped for cash since her car was destroyed and I'd vanished with the second account, jumped at the chance. She had no idea I was pulling the strings. Nicole told me my wife hesitated, asked a lot of questions about the pay, about the hours. Eventually, Nicole lowballed her. She took it anyway. I guess that says something about her situation. The first time I walked in after it was running, the place had a new paint smell, bright lights, fancy mirrors on the walls. I saw her behind the front desk, wearing a black polo with the salon's logo embroidered on it. She looked up, saw me, and her face went pale. I didn't say a word. Didn't smile, didn't frown. Just nodded at Nicole. Then I walked back out. My wife stood there, frozen. That image is burned in my mind. I started coming by almost daily. Sometimes I'd just stand in the waiting area, not even booking an appointment. Or I'd say I was checking on business stuff with Nicole. My wife would keep her head down, greet me politely. "Hello, welcome," like she'd do with any customer, but her voice trembled. I never responded. After a while, she stopped trying to make eye contact. She'd stare at the keyboard, or shuffle papers, or wipe the counter, anything to avoid looking at me. Nicole installed the cameras, as we agreed. I never even had to watch them. It was enough knowing they were there, that if my wife wanted to vent or rant or cry, it'd be on record. Cruel? Maybe. But that's what I did. I'd stand there, imagining she was replaying all the mistakes in her head. She was stuck, and I guess I wanted her to feel what I felt, trapped and powerless. Sometimes I'd see a flicker of tears in her eyes, but she'd blink them away. I'd just watch, silent. I never touched her. Never threatened her. I just existed in the same room, and it was enough to make her uncomfortable. That was the point. It carried on like that for weeks. I spent my nights at a small apartment I rented month to month. I never told her the address. She tried calling me a few times, left voicemails, but I ignored them. Once, she tried to corner me at the salon, asked if we could talk. I just walked right past her, looked at Nicole, said something about checking the books, and left. Maybe it was petty, but it felt like the only way to respond to all the lies and disrespect. She took everything from me, so I took my presence and turned it into a weight she had to carry every single day. By the end of that month, word was around that I'd parted ways with her. People asked me if we were divorcing. I said nothing. I saw Mark once or twice from a distance. He didn't come near me, kept his head down. Good. The rest of the world seemed to move on, but I stayed in that limbo, living out of a bag, working part-time at the auto shop. Nicole would text me with updates about how things at the salon were fine, how my wife was holding up. I'd just respond. Okay. I didn't feel joy, but I didn't feel regret either. I was turning into someone else. Maybe that was the real cost. All those years, I never imagined I'd sink to this. But once you cross a certain line, you realize you're capable of darkness you never thought you had. It wasn't about hurting her physically or humiliating her in public. It was about a quiet, daily reminder that I wasn't done. That she couldn't just brush me aside, cheat with a guy in a storage room, and laugh about it. And if that made me the bad guy, so be it. Some days I just sat across the street in my truck, sipping coffee, watching people go in and out of the salon. Through the window, I'd see her face behind the counter. Sometimes our eyes met. Sometimes they didn't. I'd think about the old days, her laugh, her way of dancing around the kitchen when a good song came on the radio, the nights we spent planning for the future. It all seemed like a dream. Like it happened to different people. When the salon finally got busy, Nicole hired more staff. My wife stayed on. She didn't quit, maybe because she had bills to pay or nowhere else to go. She'd show up, greet customers, smile politely. But every time I went in, that smile died on her lips. And that's all I needed to see to keep going. Now, a few months later, I live in a small, one-bedroom place above a tailor shop. The landlord doesn't ask questions as long as I pay on time. I still work at the auto shop part-time, just enough to cover expenses. I don't watch TV anymore. Don't really see the point. The nights are quiet. Sometimes I flip through old photo albums, sometimes I just stare at the wall. There's no big closure, no final conversation that ties everything up in a neat bow. It's just day-to-day existence. She and I haven't spoken. Not one real conversation since that night at the garage. She still works for Nicole, still stands behind that counter. Sometimes I pop in. Sometimes I don't. I'll walk in, nod at Nicole, maybe pick up a brochure for some treatment I'll never get, then leave. My wife will barely glance my way. I can feel her eyes on me, though. People sense those things. I don't keep many friends now. Mark and I are done. I guess most people don't know what to say to me, so they keep their distance. I can't blame them. I'm not exactly good company. I show up at the shop, fix a few transmissions, help rotate tires, keep to myself. The guys there must think I'm a weirdo, but that's all right. I'm past worrying about it. Sometimes I'll buy a cup of coffee from the cart across the street from the salon, and just watch. She'll come out to smoke. I see the slump in her shoulders. She holds the cigarette like it's her only comfort. Our eyes might meet for half a second. There's a lot in that half second. Guilt, sadness, maybe some leftover affection from the old days. I don't know. All I know is neither of us says a word. Then she goes back inside, and I finish my coffee. People ask me if I plan on divorcing her. Maybe eventually. But right now, I don't feel urgency. The money I sunk into that salon is basically gone. I don't miss it. I can get by on what I earn. I've got no children to worry about, no big plans for the future. I'm a man in his 50s, living day to day. My father used to talk about dignity and pride. Well, I lost one or both along the way, but somehow I don't regret what I did. Some folks might say it's not healthy, that I should seek therapy, find closure, all that talk. But I can't bring myself to care. Life is simpler this way, even if it's lonely. I'm not a hero in this story. I'm just a guy who saw his wife on her knees with another man and broke something in return. That's it. No moral lesson, no grand speech. Just the slow drip of time passing, a man's heart hollowed out, and a woman working at a front desk she hates. Maybe that's a punishment, maybe it's just how things settled. I never turn on the TV. The house I shared with her sits empty. We still co-own it, but neither of us lives there. Sometimes I wonder if she goes back to check on it. Maybe. I haven't been there in weeks. I just picture the furniture gathering dust, the walls absorbing the silence. Kind of like me. Once in a while, I dream about the day I found her. In the dream, it's always silent. No rain, no horn, just her face looking up, and my eyes meeting hers through the window. Then I wake up with my heart pounding, and the quiet of my apartment closes in again. In those moments, I realize how deep the betrayal cut. But I also realize I survived it, in my own way. Do I ever think about reconciliation? No. That part of me is gone. Do I think about what might have been if I'd come home later, if I hadn't seen them? Sometimes. But there's no point. Life doesn't rewind. We just move forward, carrying our baggage, building new armor where the old wounds were. I finish my shifts at the shop, head home, maybe stop for groceries. On the weekends, I go to a bar sometimes, alone, just for a beer. I rarely talk to anyone. The bartender greets me by name, that's about it. Then Monday rolls around, and the pattern repeats. I guess this is what it looks like on the other side of a broken marriage. The regular world spins on, and you become a footnote. But every so often, I'll park across from that salon, see her step outside with a cigarette, glance across the street at me. We lock eyes, a brief moment, either one of us speaking. And I can tell she remembers everything, just like I do. It's in her gaze, that flicker of something. Regret, maybe? Or maybe just the memory of what we were. It lingers there, wordless. Then she goes back in, and I drive away. And that's enough for me. That's the life I've got now. It's not happy, it's not heroic, but it's mine. And in her eyes I'll always be there, whether she likes it or not.